Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash. A great episode. A lot of stuff went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, you have Grace revealing herself to Orland, and then the whole situation of the team finally figuring out who she was, because it turns out obviously she attacked the SCPD, but it's like she went to collect a file, and that file she went to collect was based on her parents' murder, because she's basically hunting down the metahuman that killed her family. But even when you saw what Cisco vibed, you can kind of tell it didn't seem like it was on purpose, and it wasn't. It's just because at the time Vicky didn't she didn't know she was a metahuman. It's just like, oh crap, she saw sparks and she kind of ran. And it's kind of sad because it's hate kind of blinds you, and it's so interesting because I feel like their powers seem like when it comes to Orland and when it comes to Grace, it seems like their powers blind them. It seems like it fuels the anger. To be fair, it's just I guess that hate, when you've built it up for so long, of course, to be fair, powers doesn't it's kind of a great parallel, because it's you see this whole Grace situation, and then Grace's anger and vitriol for Vicky and metahumans literally is rivaled by how much Eobard hates Barry. So it's kind of interesting that these parallels are happening at the same time. But for her, it's she wants to wipe out all metahumans, but you feel like Orland doesn't see things that way anymore, because for him it's especially when you realize oh wait, Gracie's a metahuman too, and he didn't want her to grow up in a world where he is this mass murderer and stuff like that. And like I said, it seemed like he changed the moment his powers went away. So I think it was kind of their powers seem like they do kind of pollute them a little bit. It's also interesting too, because it's Grace literally has no problem killing humans. The fact of the matter, at least Orland had some code of yeah, he'd kill metahumans, but he wouldn't go after normal humans. They might take them out, but he'd never kill them outright. Grace has no problem. We saw that last time with Ambrose, which even Orland was no, she didn't take that power from me. I asked her to help me with the cure. I wanted to get a cure for me and you, because I wanted you to be happy. That's all this was about. But for her, it's she was so blinded by hate that that's all she could see. Because Orland didn't realize at that time all that hate he was spewing. He didn't realize, Grace could hear him. And I think even if he knew she could, he wouldn't have stopped. But now seeing who she's become and realizing, she's the monster he made her into. Because for one, it's he remembers that sweet little girl that's a daughter to him, his niece, but who's more like a daughter to him. It's but now he sees what she's become, and she's become a mirror image of him. His hate turned her into that, And it's so sad to see things kind of play out at that point, even to the point, which, side note, that's a lot of dope stuff, the blade coming in through the window, Barry running to get Vicky out of the way in time, but also Nora running with her and the dagger flying behind her the entire time across the city. I was that's pretty dope. But it's kind of interesting because obviously a big part of this whole situation also secrets, and secrets kind of plays a big part all across this episode. You had the whole thing with Ralph and Cisco, because I love he messes up Cisco's date with Camilla, because hey, they're officially boyfriend and girlfriend now. But then the whole situation of yo, it's oh, you want to introduce her to the team, and you have Cisco being shut up, and then just kind of interrupting, and it's okay. And then later on, he tries to get her a job with Iris as as a photographer and everything, and it's oh, maybe she'll stumble across something. She'll be working with the team, and she'll become he's I Peter Parkered her, which is interesting because I literally just talked about this in Arrow. They made a Spider-Man reference there. It's literally back-to-back Arrowverse stuff referencing Spider-Man. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But you can tell Ralph had the best of intentions, because basically he just wanted, to welcome, her with open arms, essentially, with the team and everything. Because it's oh, this way you get to work with your girlfriend and everything. But for Cisco, it's that separation of because for so long, because obviously the last relationship he was in was with, Gypsy, and, that got a little, they had their powers and everything, but it was more so the fact is, for the first time in his life, having normalcy in his life because he hasn't been normal for a long time. Because let's not forget, he still also has his weird, affiliation with his powers. Because at the end of the day, his powers came from Eobard, so he always felt a little weird about them. I mean, it's something he's kind of dealt with, but I think on some level, it's still kind of like, I became a metahuman because of Eobard, so it kind of makes me feel a little evil with that regard. Like I said, he's still dealt with, but I think there's still some level of him that feels like that. But it's more so like, hey, I feel normal for the first time ever. I don't have to worry about my powers and stuff like that with Camilla. But Ralph is saying the fact of the matter is you're hiding a part of who you are. And if you do that, like, you'd have to basically live your entire life as a double life, because you'd always be hiding from her who you really are and what you're capable of doing. Because for Cisco, it's not even like hiding like Team Flash from her. It's like, no, guys are my family, and I would never feel embarrassed about that. But it's a personal thing. And it's so interesting because obviously that ties into Vicky's story, because Vicky didn't tell her family that she was a metahuman, even to the point her husband was like, oh, you're a ticking time bomb, that you're a meta time bomb, essentially. Because it's so interesting because how the perception of metahumans is so interesting, because some people will look at them as kind of like, oh, because obviously you have metahumans like Flash and XS, but it's a situation of, especially in a circumstance where it's like your daughter just got hurt because of what your wife just did. So you can understand like the fear, because it's, for one, it's all kind of being jumped at you all at once, because that's what Barry was trying to get across. Because obviously in her mind, Nora's like, no, it's okay to keep secrets if it means protecting the people you love. But Barry's like, no. Which, a great example would be Oliver. Oliver knows many, many times over what happens with, secrets being kept. Literally, Felicity in the future is dealing with the ramifications of that herself. And it's kind of, like I said, it's just the parallels between the shows is, like, really nice. I'm sure that was kind of planned out. Maybe on some level. Maybe not. I don't know. It's just interesting in that regard. But it's like, secrets cause more harm than good. It's like you have the best of intentions when you're keeping a secret like that. You want to protect someone, but by not telling them the truth, you're not giving them a chance to make a choice of their own. That basically every choice they make is a choice that essentially you're the one that's making, because you haven't informed them. Because at least you can give people time to process, like, oh wow, my wife or my mom's a metahuman. Like, obviously they get the chance later on, but that's something that they were robbed that chance of before. But obviously it's just because for Vicky, it's like she didn't want to really face it, because for her it would have made it real. She was scared, because I think she was just scared how her family might react. Obviously they had the reaction they did, but I think it is a point that they will be able to move past it, And I'm curious to see whether this is all going to push Cisco to eventually tell Camilla the truth. Because if she finds out last second that, like, oh, you've been hiding this huge thing from me like that, then it's definitely going to be an issue, because it's like, you've been lying to me this entire time. No one likes being lied to, which is so interesting. I would say that, considering the fact is, lo and behold, Nora's truth comes out. She wanted to tell it, but she just couldn't bring herself to do it because she's lied for so long. And then, you have Sherlock being the one who figured it all out, piecing everything together, and he reveals the truth, and just everyone's shocked, like, wait, what? Literally the entire team is there to hear this truth, and it's like, Nora, tell me it's not true. And the person hurt the most, you can tell, is Barry on multiple levels, because he had the whole conversation of like, yeah, maybe one day he could forgive Eobard. Obviously, that wasn't anytime soon when he said that. Obviously, that was still within the season. But let's not also forget, they literally ran into Eobard last year doing the Crisis on Earth X crossover. So, yeah, he was all still being a bad guy, taunting Barry then. So it's like, of course, he's still on Barry's shit list. It's like, it's hard to forgive the person who killed your parents. Like, Vicky's situation with Grace, that was, an accident. I mean, obviously in Grace's head, it's like, it doesn't matter. Metahumans are scum. They hurt people. That hate is still there. But at least in Barry's case, it's like, no, you straight up killed his mom because you were pissed at him. You have your personal vendetta against the Flash, so you went through all that, killing his mom, framing his dad for her murder. Like, you basically ruined Barry's life, and it's like, of course he's gonna hate you. And the fact is, the person, his daughter, they built up this great relationship, and now understand why Barry's hurt, because not only are you working with the one person in this world he hates with a passion, you work with his arch nemesis who caused so much damage. Once again, to be fair, Nora didn't know that ahead of time, Barry and Eobard's past. But even when she learned it, she didn't tell him the truth. The fact is that it had to come from Sherlock, because I think given enough time, maybe she would have told them, but I think they still would have had the same reaction. But the thing is, she's been sitting on this the entire time, because basically it bases the entire relationship that Barry's built with her, that Iris has built with her, that all of them have built with her, has been based on a lie. I did not see it coming when Barry was going to locking her up in the pipeline. I didn't see that coming. To be fair, it makes sense, because for Barry, it's like, I can't trust you. You literally have lied to us. You've been working with Eobard Thawne, the reverse flashes, the entire time. Of course, he's going to have that reaction. And she's like, I'm sorry I lied to you. And he's like, I'm sorry too. And you see her breaking down, and it breaks your heart, because it's like, because for her, everything she did was out of love, because it's like, she wanted to save her dad, and she's like, okay, like, she didn't know who, she knew Eobard was a bad guy, obviously, because he was locked up, but she didn't know to extent. She thought, hey, he's a reformed criminal and everything. It's like, dude, I'm sure Eobard left out a lot. Now, it's so interesting on many different levels. One, the fact is, Eobard is actually the one who told her to tell her dad the truth, because I think, once again, and that was my thought, he wants Barry to be hurt, because it's like, oh, knowing that your daughter, I was the one there pulling your daughter's strings the entire time. Like, I always felt like that was that was meant to be a gut punch. Like, that's why he wanted the truth out. Not maybe because he feels like Barry will, be caught off guard. He'll react a certain way. I don't know. But it's interesting. Like, he wanted her to finally tell Barry the truth. It's like, tell him everything, because he wanted that on Barry's mind, because it would also hurt Barry, because it would ruin his relationship with Nora. That's what he wanted to do. He wants to destroy every aspect of Barry. He destroyed Barry's life with his parents, and now it's like he's trying to do the same thing with his daughter, trying to ruin everything with Barry, destroy him the most absolute way he can. And it's so interesting. Let's not forget, this is all happening while the clock is ticking down for him. I'm assuming that's his execution that's happening. But what's so interesting too is how we find out how Grace got to this time period. She used the time spear they built for Eobard. So I'm assuming, that's gotta be. He had to have set that up. Him and Grace had to have been in talk. For her to even know to go back in time, it's so interesting too, because she said the whole thing of like, oh, I want to fight with you again. So that means during the original timeline, Orlin stayed Cicada, and then he passed the torch on to her. Like, they were kind of working together in that regard. Once again, maybe someone stopped him, maybe he just died, but she took over from there. That's what I'm kind of assuming. That was kind of a thought process I had. But obviously the timeline changed this time. But obviously it seemed like it was out of, Eobard's control, but it's all been in his control, because he figured out the code to kind of make it so that he can control the timeline. He's kind of like broken down to like a mathematical situation of like, because for him, he's been the one that's always been, like, once again, I brought that up before, he's always suffered the least ramifications for messing with the timeline, because he's always been kind of, smart about it. At least he found some loophole, and maybe we're kind of getting to that point where he learned that loophole that's allowed him to be, because once again, you shouldn't exist on many different levels, because of the whole Eddie situation back in season 1. That was supposed to wipe you out from existence, but you managed to outrun that. Then there's a whole Legends of Tomorrow situation with the Spear of Destiny. That should have been enough, yet you're still running amok, So I would assume this has something to do with that, like the code to kind of mess with the timeline. You would think that would have something to do with the Speed Force, but I guess, the Speed Force is its own thing. It's kind of its, and the timeline is its own thing. Like, there's the connection, sure, but they're not directly correlated. They're kind of probably indirectly correlated, I guess, in a certain regard, but it's just like, everything, once again, and, Sherlock points it out, it's like, every move he's made, every move Nora's been making has been to help him, and it's like, once again, like, what is his plan? I don't know. Like, I guess to solidify his own existence, make sure that he can kind of basically, and that's what makes me wonder about this. I'm going to talk about something that is kind of spoilerish, but it's just a little tidbit of information I know about the comic books, and it's like it's something I was referencing before. The whole villain I brought up in a different episode. I was like, season 3 finale there's a certain villain that gets created because of a Speed Force storm. Basically, was it Godspeed or whatever? I don't remember it saying it's a speedster that's created from the Speed Force storm. And I'm like, do you think that's what Eobard's trying to do? Like, you know, is he trying to become a speed god in a sense of like being able to not only traverse the timeline without ramifications, you know? So that means destroying Barry would be on another level. He could obliterate Barry from every ounce of time, especially if he doesn't have to suffer the ramifications for it, you know? That potentially could be where he's going. Like, that might be the setup they might be going with. Once again, I still think, you know, Cicada, you know, Grace is still that. Like, she's a part of all of this. She has to be. If she turns out not to be, I'll be surprised. But it's like, it's too coincidental that another person from the future just happens to come to the past like that. It's like, it's all been part of Eobard's plan. He's been planning this out for God knows how long. I mean, we still don't even know how he managed to get in that situation. It's interesting, too, because we learn a little bit from Grace about, like, how, like, oh, for her, it's like the metahuman scum is running amok in the future, which is interesting because let's not forget, and it's something I brought up during Arrow, too, there's still the whole storyline about Argus in 2044, the timeline. Is it 2044 or is it 2043? I keep saying 2044. I'm pretty sure it's 2044, where Zari's from. Basically, in her time period, like, Argus is rounding up metahumans and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting that you have this metahuman serial killer running amok, doing her thing, while also Argus is tracking down metahumans and stuff like that. So that might be some crossing paths. Like, obviously, like I said, that's still a lot we have to fill in there, but that's still kind of something to be thought about in the back of your head about that too. So maybe that's kind of why, you know, she kind of does what she does too, is because of all that, because there are so many metahumans and Argus is just arresting them. It's like, no, they need to be wiped out from existence. So, and we also learned about how Grace's powers work. Basically, she's because at first, like, I didn't realize, like, because apparently they were saying, like, oh, she can nullify powers too. It's like, I didn't realize that, because it seemed like everyone's powers were working around her, but it does seem like there is a nullification period. Maybe it's something she can't do all at once. Well, to be fair, it's like because of the placement in her brain is where the piece of the satellite is. She can telekinetically manipulate and control other people's dark matter. But there's also the situation of Nora's connected to her because Nora was in her mind, and because of that, they're bound together. But, you know, Nora's going to probably try and make herself feel useless. Like, no, I can help you track down Grace. The fact is, I can, you know, see her through my eyes, like, we're connected like that. But it's like, how can we trust you after knowing everything that we know now? And it's just like, jeez, things are going to get ugly. I'm sure Iris is probably going to be pissed at Sherlock, even though he figured this all out. For him, it's like, the fact is, I asked you not to look into Nora, and you did it anyway. It's like, I found something, but for her, I'm sure she's still not going to appreciate it, because it's like, her family's kind of falling apart now. Like, I'm sure Barry's not going to be in the right space of mind. She herself isn't. No one on the team is going to be, but, like, that's a heavy-ass bomb. It's kind of interesting, because this episode is called Time Bomb, and this whole situation wasn't literally a ticking time bomb, because eventually, sooner or later, the truth was going to come out. I'm sure for Nora, she would have preferred it coming out when it was all said and done, when everything was saved, and, you know, her data was safe, and everything was kind of back to the way it was, you know, supposed to be on some level, you know? It's definitely going to be interesting, too, because of all this, you know. Barry, you know, Orlin made him promise, like, save my Gracie, and it's like, he might have been the only one that could have potentially pulled Grace back, but now that that's no longer an option, like, what are they going to do? Because, like, it's going to be pretty messed up when Grace does eventually wake up present day, because it's like, oh yeah, your future self killed your uncle, the only family you had left, just because you were, you know, your older self held on to so much hate, and it manifested so much over the years that it led to you killing your own uncle, because it's like, you kind of thought he was weak, and, you know, he was being too sympathetic to, like, you know, metahumans and stuff like that. It's like, he grew weak in her eyes, so he had to be removed. And I guess that for her, it's like, I have my mission of killing all these metahumans, I can't let weakness stop me, so she got rid of her one weakness, and that was him. Like, he's the only one that potentially could have talked her out of this, and now it's going to be like, okay, so what's going to happen to present-day Grace after all of this, you know? Maybe if they can change present-day Grace, which, to be fair, she's full of hate, if they could have changed her mind, maybe that's going to affect future Grace, but that's definitely going to be interesting to see, ultimately, how that all plays out. Like I said, this was a great episode. Shit has officially hit the fan in many, many different regards. it's definitely going to be interesting to see, going forward, like I said, what Eobard's true intentions are. Whether they are what I was kind of saying they are, or is there something more to this? We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about today. Somebody, me, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good